When the coke hit Elena Ward's pristine white blouse in the marble lobby of Arcona Dynamics, splashing across her chest like crimson humiliation, the room erupted in cruel laughter. 20 executives in $1,000 suits watched as the liquid dripped onto Italian marble, their phones already capturing her degradation. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that this quiet woman in her simple navy dress held the power to destroy every career in that room with a single signature. Because Elena Ward wasn't just another nobody they could torment. She was the founder's wife. And in exactly 6 hours, she would become their new chairwoman. This is the story of how dignity conquers cruelty, how quiet strength topples kingdoms built on bullying, and how one woman's patient endurance turned a corporate culture of abuse into a reckoning that would echo through every boardroom in Chicago. Stay with me until the very end. You won't believe how this unfolds. And please comment your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. The elevator doors slid open, like a curtain rising on a stage, revealing the gleaming marble expanse of Arcona Dynamics' 42nd floor lobby. Elena Ward stepped out her sensible black flats, making barely a whisper against the polished stone. Her navy dress was unremarkable department store quality, conservative cut, the kind worn by middle management or administrative assistants. Her brown hair was pulled into a neat bun, secured with a simple elastic band. No jewelry except a thin gold wedding ring that caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. She moved with purpose, but without haste, her leather portfolio clutched against her side. To the casual observer, she was invisible. Another worker bee in the corporate hive. Someone to be overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. Which was exactly what Elena had been counting on. The lobby buzzed with the controlled chaos of a major consulting firm preparing for its quarterly culture summit. Banners proclaiming innovation through unity hung from the vaulted ceiling, while registration tables formed neat lines across the marble floor. The city's business elite had gathered for what Arcona's marketing team had branded as a transformative dialogue on workplace excellence, corporate speak for a networking event disguised as professional development. Elena paused near a potted palm, watching the social choreography unfold. Groups formed and dissolved with the fluid precision of molecules in solution. Handshakes where currency, business cards were traded like playing cards, and laughter rang with the practiced pitch of professional courtesy. Everyone here had a role to play, a position to maintain, an image to project. Everyone except Elena. She checked her phone. 8:47 a.m. The summit didn't officially begin until 9, but the real business, the conversations that mattered, the deals that shaped Chicago's financial landscape was already happening in hushed clusters around coffee stations and leather seating areas. "Excuse me, miss." A sharp voice cut through her observation. Elena turned to find a young man approaching with the swagger of inherited privilege. Jared Pike couldn't have been more than 25, his Brooks Brothers suit hanging perfectly on his lean frame. His Princeton class ring caught the light as he gestured, and his smile held the particular brand of condescension reserved for those he deemed beneath his notice. "You're not supposed to be in this area." Jared continued, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby groups. "The staff entrance is around back, and I think there's been some confusion about your access level." Elena met his gaze steadily. "I'm here for the summit." Jared's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Right. Look, I don't know who told you that you could just walk in here, but this event is for senior-level professionals only. The invitation list is pretty exclusive." He glanced around, ensuring his audience was watching. "Maybe you're thinking of the community college job fair. That's next week." Heat rose in Elena's cheeks, but her expression remained composed. Around them, Conversations had quieted. Phones were discreetly angled in their direction. The modern Colosseum had found its entertainment. "I have an invitation," Elena said quietly, reaching into her portfolio. "I'm sure you do." Jared smirked, not bothering to look at the pristine cardstock she withdrew. "Probably printed it yourself. Very resourceful." He turned to his growing audience. "You have to appreciate the Hustle Right show's initiative." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Elena recognized several faces from Chicago Business Journal profiles, managing partners, fund directors, innovation officers, people who shaped the city's economic landscape with their decisions, people who are now watching her humiliation like a blood sport. "The thing is," Jared continued, warming to his performance, "we have standards here. Image matters. Perception is reality in this business." He looked Elena up and down with theatrical disdain. "And frankly, you don't fit the aesthetic we're going for." Elena's hand tightened on her portfolio, but her voice remained level. "I understand standards. I also understand respect." "Respect?" Jared's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Respect is earned, sweetheart. And right now you're trespassing." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the marble space. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your little folder and your bargain basement outfit, and you're going to leave, quietly, before security has to escort you out." The lobby had gone silent, except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant rumble of Chicago traffic 42 floors below. Elena could feel dozens of eyes on her, recording every moment of her degradation. This was the moment, the test she had anticipated, the crucible she had prepared for. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying a new quality that made several observers lean forward, "I think I'll stay." Jared's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "Listen, lady." "Elena." Her correction was gentle but firm. "My name is Elena Ward." "Fine, Elena." Jared's tone dripped with patronizing patience. "Let me explain how this works. This is a private event. Invitation only. Corporate leadership only. People who matter." He gestured broadly at the assembly. "Look around. Do you see anyone else who looks like, well, like you?" Elena did look around, her gaze moving slowly across the crowd. Designer suits, platinum jewelry, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Faces lifted by expensive procedures, teeth whitened to impossible perfection, hair styled by the kind of salons that required appointments months in advance. "You're right," she said finally. "I don't see anyone who looks like me." "Exactly." Jared's grin widened. "So, but that," Elena continued, "doesn't mean I don't belong here." The confidence in her voice sent a ripple of uncertainty through the crowd. Jared's expression shifted, confusion flickering across his features. This wasn't following the script. The victim was supposed to crumble, to flee in embarrassment, to validate their superiority through her submission. "Look," Jared's voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through his practiced charm. "I don't know what game you're playing, but no game." Elena's portfolio shifted to her other arm, a subtle movement that drew attention to the documents within. Just someone attending an event she was invited to. Invited by who? The question came from behind Jared, spoken by a woman whose presence commanded immediate attention. Vanessa Cole emerged from the crowd, like a shark sensing blood in the water. She was everything Elena was not: tall, where Elena was average, commanding, where Elena was quiet, dressed in a Chanel suit that cost more than most people's cars. Her blonde hair was swept into an architectural updo that had probably required an hour of professional styling, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm sorry." Vanessa continued, her tone suggesting she was anything but. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Vanessa Cole, Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives." She paused, letting the weight of her title settle. And you are? Elena Ward. Ward. Vanessa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in a show of concentration. I'm not familiar with that name. What firm are you with? I'm currently between positions. The admission sent a visible wave of satisfaction through the watching crowd. Here was confirmation of what they had assumed, an unemployed nobody who had somehow stumbled into their exclusive gathering. Ah! Vanessa's smile turned predatory. And how exactly did someone who is between positions come to be invited to our little gathering? Elena's silence stretched just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. She could feel the weight of their expectation, their hunger for her humiliation. They wanted her to break, to confess her deception, to validate their assumptions about who belonged in their rarefied world. Through proper channels, she said finally. Jared laughed, a sound that echoed off the marble walls. Proper channels. Lady, the only proper channel for someone like you is the unemployment office. Someone like me. Elena's voice remained steady, but there was a new quality to it, a stillness that made several observers step back. Come on. Jared gestured broadly, playing to his audience. Look at yourself. Look at this place. You think you can just show up here and blend in? You think these people, he swept his arm toward the crowd, are going to accept you as an equal? Elena's gaze moved slowly across the assembly, taking in each face, cataloging each expression of amusement or disgust. I think, she said quietly, that acceptance isn't something I need from strangers. God, listen to her. Vanessa laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. The delusion is almost impressive. She stepped closer to Elena, her heels clicking against the marble. Honey, let me give you some free advice. This isn't the place for whatever social experiment you think you're conducting. These people, she gestured to the crowd, they eat girls like you for breakfast. Girls like me. You know exactly what I mean. Vanessa's voice dropped to a stage whisper that carried perfectly across the silent lobby. Poor, desperate, insignificant. Each word was a precisely aimed dart. You can put on your best Kohl's dress and carry your little portfolio, but you can't fake breeding. You can't fake class, and you certainly can't fake belonging. The cruelty was so casual, so effortless, that several observers actually smiled. This was entertainment to them, watching someone they deemed inferior be put in her place. It was validation of their own superiority, confirmation that the natural order was intact. Elena absorbed the words like stones thrown into still water, each one creating ripples that spread outward before settling into calm. Her expression didn't change. Her posture didn't shift. She simply stood there, absorbing their venom with a composure that was beginning to unnerve her tormentors. Well, Jared demanded, aren't you going to say something? Defend yourself. What would you like me to say? The question was so simple, so genuinely curious, that it caught him off guard. What? You've made several statements about me. Elena continued, her voice carrying across the suddenly tense lobby. About my background, my worth, my right to be here. What response would satisfy you? Jared's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. This wasn't how these confrontations were supposed to go. The victim was supposed to fight back, to give them ammunition for further humiliation. Or better yet, to break down entirely, providing the ultimate confirmation of their superiority. How about the truth? Vanessa interjected, stepping into the breach. How about admitting that you don't belong here and saving us all the embarrassment of having security remove you? Elena nodded slowly, as if considering the suggestion seriously. The truth, she repeated. That's interesting. What's interesting about it? Just that truth has a way of surprising people. Elena's grip on her portfolio shifted slightly, drawing attention to whatever documents lay within. Sometimes, what we think we know about someone, about their background, their connections, their right to be somewhere, isn't the whole story. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Vanessa's face. For the first time since the confrontation began, she looked genuinely unsure. What's that supposed to mean? Before Elena could respond, Jared stepped forward, his frustration finally boiling over. You know what? I'm tired of this performance. Security. His shout echoed through the lobby, drawing startled looks from hotel staff arranging nearby conference materials. But before anyone could respond, he grabbed a glass of Coca-Cola from a nearby refreshment table. Someone's abandoned breakfast drink, ice still clinking against the sides. Since you won't leave voluntarily, he said, raising the glass with theatrical flourish, maybe this will help you understand your position here. Time seemed to slow as the dark liquid arced through the air. Elena watched it approach with a strange sense of detachment, as if she were observing the scene from outside her own body. The Coke hit her square in the chest, soaking through her navy dress, staining the conservative fabric dark. The cold liquid shocked her skin, ice cubes bouncing off her chest to scatter across the marble floor. The lobby erupted in gasps, nervous laughter, and the distinctive sound of dozens of phone cameras capturing the moment. Elena stood perfectly still, as the Coke dripped from her dress to pool at her feet, her expression unchanged. She didn't cry out, didn't stumble backward, didn't react at all, beyond a slight tightening around her eyes. There, Jared announced, his voice cracking slightly with adrenaline and triumph. Now maybe you understand the kind of respect you can expect here. The crowd's laughter was ugly, feeding on itself, growing louder and more vicious. Someone called out, "Should have worn a darker dress." Another voice added, "At least it matches her shoes now." The cruelty multiplied, each person trying to top the last insult, competing for the approval of their peers through Elena's degradation. But Elena didn't run. She didn't break down. She simply stood there, Coke dripping from her dress, looking at each laughing face with the kind of attention usually reserved for studying art in a museum. Her silence was so complete, so profound, that gradually the laughter began to die. Well, Vanessa's voice had lost some of its confidence. Are you going to say something? Cry, scream, storm out? Elena dabbed at her dress with a tissue from her portfolio, the movement precise and unhurried. No, she said quietly. I don't think I will. What? I said no. Elena's voice carried a quality that made the entire lobby lean forward to hear. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to scream. And I'm certainly not going to leave. Jared's face flushed red. Are you insane? Do you have any idea who I am? Who these people are? I have some idea. Yes. Then you know what we can do to you. One phone call and you'll never work in this city again. Hell, you'll be lucky to get a job serving coffee at Starbucks. Elena's slight smile was like a crack in a dam. That's assuming, of course, that you have the power to make such calls. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, Elena reached into her portfolio and withdrew her phone. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, typing something that took several long moments. The lobby watched in fascination as she worked, the silence broken only by the soft tap of her fingertips against glass. When she finished, she looked up to find every eye in the room fixed on her. I just sent a message, she announced calmly. To who? Vanessa's voice was sharp with suspicion. Someone who needed to know about this morning's cultural demonstration. Before anyone could respond, Elena's phone chimed with an incoming text. She glanced at the screen, and for the first time since entering the lobby, her expression changed. A slight smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, not triumphant, not vindictive, but satisfied in a way that made several observers step backward. "Good news," she announced to the assembled crowd. "My morning just got much more interesting." "What are you talking about?" Jared demanded. Elena's gaze swept across the crowd one more time, cataloging faces, memorizing expressions. When she spoke, her voice carried a new authority that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within her. "I'm talking about accountability. I'm talking about consequences. I'm talking about the fact that every action in this lobby has been recorded not just by your phones, but by the building's security system." She gestured toward a discreet camera mounted high on the wall, its red recording light blinking steadily. "Amazing how clear those feeds are these days. High definition, multiple angles, perfect audio quality." The blood drained from Jared's face. "So what? You think anyone's going to care about some nobody getting put in her place?" "You might be surprised," Elena replied, her voice steady as bedrock, "by how much people care about dignity." She tucked her phone back into her portfolio, the movement drawing attention to documents that seemed to gleam with importance in the lobby's bright lighting. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe the summit is about to begin, and I wouldn't want to miss the opening remarks." Elena turned toward the conference center entrance, her heels clicking against marble stained with Coca-Cola. Behind her, the lobby remained frozen in tableau. Dozens of Chicago's business elite, standing in stunned silence, their entertainment having somehow transformed into something else entirely. As she reached the entrance to the main conference hall, Elena paused and looked back one final time. Her voice carried clearly across the lobby, reaching every ear with perfect clarity. "Oh, and Jared." She waited until his shocked gaze met hers. "You might want to start updating your resume. I have a feeling your career trajectory is about to change dramatically." The conference hall doors closed behind her, with a soft whisper leaving the lobby in chaos. Whispered conversations erupted like small fires, questions flying between groups as everyone tried to understand what had just happened. Who was Elena Ward? How had she remained so calm? What did she mean about consequences? But perhaps most unsettling of all was the way she had looked at them in those final moments, not with anger or hurt, or the wounded pride of the humiliated, but with the patient attention of someone taking inventory, someone keeping score. In the conference hall, Elena found a seat in the back row, her stained dress marking her as distinctly as a scarlet letter. Around her, the city's business elite filed in their conversations, subdued their glances frequent and worried. The morning's entertainment had left a bitter taste, and the promise of consequences hung in the air like smoke. Elena opened her portfolio and withdrew a leather-bound notebook. With precise handwriting, she began to record names, faces, exact quotes from the lobby encounter. Every detail was captured with the methodical attention of someone who understood that documentation was power. Her phone buzzed with another message. This one made her smile, a real smile this time, warm with anticipation. In 6 hours, when the summit's closing ceremony began, Elena Ward would take the stage, not as a victim, but as Arcona Dynamics' new chairwoman. The quiet woman they had dismissed, humiliated, and degraded would reveal herself as the founder's wife, armed with legal authority to reshape their world. But for now, she simply sat in her stained dress, taking notes, watching the very people who had laughed at her humiliation as they unknowingly sealed their own fates. The game was far from over. It was just beginning. The summit's opening keynote droned on about synergistic paradigm shifts, while Elena maintained her position in the back row, her notebook filling with observations that would have chilled the blood of anyone who understood their significance. Dr. Harrison Webb, Arcona's CEO, commanded the stage with practiced authority, his silver hair gleaming under the spotlights as he spoke about corporate culture and innovation. Behind him, massive screens displayed graphs showing record profits and employee satisfaction metrics that Elena knew were carefully curated fiction. Excellence, Webb declared, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, is not just about results. It's about character. It's about how we treat each other, especially those who may seem different from us. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. 20 minutes earlier, these same people had watched her humiliation with barely concealed glee. Now they nodded sagely at platitudes about respect and inclusion. Their phones already uploading photos of her degradation to private group chats with captions like, "Security fail at Arcona, and when nobody's crashed the party." During the first break, Elena made her move. While the elite clustered around coffee stations and networking corners, she approached the facility's coordinator, a tired-looking man in his 50s, whose name tag read, Marcus Thompson. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm wondering if you could help me with something." Marcus looked up from his clipboard, taking in her stained dress with a mixture of sympathy and confusion. "Ma'am, if you need directions to the restroom or... Actually, I was hoping you could tell me about the building's security system, specifically the camera coverage in the lobby." His expression shifted to wariness. "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss security protocols with..." Elena reached into her portfolio and withdrew a business card. It was simple, elegant, with just her name and a phone number. But something about the quality of the cardstock, the subtle embossing, made Marcus pause. "I understand your caution," Elena said gently, "but I think you might want to make an exception in this case." Marcus studied the card, his brow furrowing. "Ward. Why does that name sound familiar?" "Perhaps because it's on the building directory, 43rd floor corner office." The color drained from Marcus's face as understanding dawned. He looked from the card to Elena's stained dress, then back to the card. But they said you were just some what, Marcus?" He swallowed hard. "Some troublemaker who crashed the party." Elena's smile was gentle but razor sharp. "Did they? How interesting. And what do you think, Marcus? Do I look like a troublemaker to you?" Marcus studied her more carefully, now seeing past the ruined dress to the quiet authority in her bearing, the quality of her leather portfolio, the way she held herself with unconscious confidence, despite her disheveled appearance. "No, ma'am," he said slowly. "You don't." "Good. Now about those security cameras." 20 minutes later, Elena had what she needed: confirmation that the lobby incident had been captured from 4 different angles with crystal clear audio and facial recognition timestamps. Marcus had also provided her with the contact information for the security company, along with his personal assurance that the footage would be preserved until she requested it. As she returned to the conference hall for the next session, Elena noticed the whispers that followed in her wake. Word was spreading through the summit like wildfire, not about who she really was, but about her strange composure, her mysterious phone calls, her unsettling confidence in the face of humiliation. "Did you see how she just stood there?" she heard one woman whisper to her companion. "It was almost like she was studying us." "Creepy if you ask me," came the reply. "Like she was taking notes or something." Elena smiled to herself. They had no idea how accurate that assessment was. The morning's second session featured a panel on fostering inclusive leadership, another masterpiece of corporate doublespeak that would have been hilarious if it weren't so transparently hypocritical. Elena watched Vanessa Cole take the stage as one of the panelists, her Chanel suit, immaculate, her smile radiant, her presentation about creating environments where everyone can thrive, delivered with the passion of a true believer. "We must ask ourselves," Vanessa declared, her voice ringing with conviction, "are we creating spaces where every voice can be heard, where every individual, regardless of background or appearance, feels valued and respected?" The audience applauded enthusiastically. Elena made another note in her book. During the Q&A session, A young woman in the audience raised her hand. Ms. Cole, how do you handle situations where there's a clear cultural mismatch, when someone just doesn't fit the organizational aesthetic? Vanessa's answer was smooth as silk. That's an excellent question. I believe that true diversity isn't just about checking boxes. It's about finding people who share our values, our commitment to excellence, our understanding of what it means to represent this organization with dignity and professionalism. More applause. Elena's pen moved steadily across the page. As the panel concluded, Elena watched Vanessa descend from the stage, basking in the warm glow of professional admiration. Their eyes met across the auditorium, and for a moment, Vanessa's confident expression flickered. There was something unsettling about the way Elena was looking at her, not with the shame or anger of the humiliated, but with the patient attention of a researcher observing a fascinating specimen. The lunch break provided Elena with her next opportunity. While the elite gathered in the exclusive executive dining room accessed by invitation only, she made her way to the building's cafeteria, where the support staff ate alongside junior employees and administrative assistants. She found exactly what she was looking for. At a corner table, 3 women who worked in various departments throughout the building, their conversation subdued but intense. "Excuse me," Elena said, approaching with a coffee cup and a gentle smile. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you discussing what happened in the lobby this morning?" The 3 women exchanged glances. The eldest, a black woman in her 40s, wearing a custodial services uniform, spoke first. "You heard about that?" "I was there," Elena said, simply taking a seat when they gestured for her to join them. "I was the woman who got the coke treatment." Shocked silence greeted this revelation. They had expected denial, explanation, anything but this calm admission. "Girl, I am so sorry," said the custodial worker, introducing herself as Beverly. "That was just wrong on every level. The way they laughed, the way they acted like it was entertainment." "It wasn't the first time either," added Sarah, a young woman from the IT help desk. "That Jared Pike character has been pulling stunts like this for months. Last week, he accidentally spilled coffee on a delivery driver who didn't move fast enough for his liking." The third woman, Maria from accounting, leaned forward conspiratorially. "And don't get me started on Vanessa Cole. That woman has made more grown men cry than a funeral director. She's got this way of making people feel like dirt, especially if they're not part of her little inner circle." Elena listened intently, asking gentle questions that encouraged them to share more stories. What emerged was a pattern of systematic bullying that went far beyond isolated incidents. Jared Pike and his cohort had created a culture of cruelty that pervaded every level of the organization, with Vanessa Cole providing executive-level protection for their behavior. "The worst part," Beverly said, shaking her head, "is that management knows. They all know. But these people bring in too much money for anyone to care about a few hurt feelings." "What if someone could make them care?" Elena asked quietly. The 3 women looked at her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Honey," Beverly said gently, "no offense, but you saw what happened this morning. These people don't listen to folks like us. We're invisible to them, unless they need someone to blame or humiliate." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. They don't listen to folks like you." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But what if they had to?" Something in her tone made all 3 women lean forward. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. Instead of answering directly, Elena reached into her portfolio and withdrew 3 business cards identical to the one she had shown Marcus earlier. She placed them on the table like playing cards in a high-stakes game. "I mean," she said softly, "that sometimes the people who seem powerless aren't as powerless as they appear." Maria picked up one of the cards, studying it with growing confusion. "Ward, but I thought, aren't you?" "Aren't I what Maria?" "Well, when we heard about this morning, everyone was saying you were just some unemployed woman who crashed the party, that you were probably mentally unstable or something. Elena's laugh was soft, but carried an edge that made all three women shiver. Is that what they're saying? How fascinating! The lunch break was nearly over, but Elena had one more stop to make. She found Dr. Webb's executive assistant, Patricia Manning, in a small office adjacent to the main conference area. Patricia was a woman in her late 50s, who had worked for Arcona for over 2 decades, rising through the ranks to become one of the most respected administrative professionals in the company. Patricia, Elena said, appearing in the doorway with the silence of a ghost. I wonder if I might have a word. Patricia looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from polite confusion to something approaching recognition. Like Marcus before her, she seemed to sense that there was more to Elena than met the eye. I'm sorry, but do we know each other? Your name seems familiar, but... We haven't been formally introduced, but I suspect you know exactly who I am. Patricia's hand stilled on her keyboard. After 30 years in corporate America, she had developed an instinct for dangerous conversations, and every nerve in her body was suddenly screaming warnings. I'm afraid I don't understand. Elena stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. The sound of the latch clicking seemed unnaturally loud in the small space. Patricia, you've been Dr. Webb's assistant for, 8 years now? 7.5. 7.5 years. That's a long time. Long enough to see a lot of things, hear a lot of conversations, witness a lot of decisions that might not look so good under scrutiny. Patricia's face had gone very pale. I'm not sure what you're implying, but... I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. For instance, it's a fact that you've processed several complaints about workplace harassment over the past 18 months. Complaints that seem to have disappeared into administrative limbo rather than being properly investigated. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia stared at Elena as if seeing a ghost. How could you possibly know about the complaint Sarah Martinez filed last March regarding Jared Pike's behavior? Or the one Jennifer Thompson submitted in August about Vanessa Cole's management style? Or perhaps the group complaint signed by 6 custodial staff members about systematic disrespect from senior management? With each revelation, Patricia seemed to shrink further into her chair. These were confidential documents sealed in secure files that only a handful of people should have had access to. Who are you? Patricia whispered. Elena's smile was gentle, but implacable. I'm someone who pays very close attention to how organizations treat their people. And I'm someone who has the authority to do something about what I observe. She reached into her portfolio and withdrew a folder that made Patricia's eyes widen in recognition. It was identical to the confidential filing folders used for the most sensitive executive communications. This, Elena said, placing the folder on Patricia's desk, contains documentation of every harassment complaint filed in the past 2 years, along with records of how they were handled, or rather, how they weren't handled. Patricia's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The documents inside were photocopies, but they were perfect reproductions of files that should have been accessible only to the highest levels of management. This is impossible, Patricia breathed. These records are classified. The only people who could access them would be... She stopped mid-sentence, her face going white as understanding crashed over her like a tidal wave. The only people who could access them would be board members, Elena finished quietly. People with administrative override authority. People like, say, an incoming chairwoman. The folder slipped from Patricia's nerveless fingers, scattering papers across her desk. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The only sound was the distant murmur of conference attendees returning from lunch. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. I'm Elena Ward, and in approximately 4 hours, I'm going to be standing on that stage as Arcona Dynamics' new chairwoman, explaining to this room full of business leaders exactly what kind of culture they've been celebrating. Patricia's professional composure finally cracked. Oh my God. This morning, the lobby. They threw Coke at you. They humiliated you in front of everyone. Yes, they did. And you know what, Patricia? I'm actually grateful. Because now, I don't have to wonder about the character of the people I'll be working with. They showed me exactly who they are. Elena gathered the scattered papers and returned them to the folder. Now I need you to do something for me. I need you to prepare a comprehensive report on all harassment complaints filed in the past 2 years, including their current status and the rationale for any decisions to dismiss or ignore them. I want it on my desk by 5 o'clock. Your desk. Corner office, 43rd floor. I believe you know the one. Patricia nodded mutely, still in shock. And Patricia, I want you to know that your job is safe. In fact, I suspect your role is about to become much more important, because effective immediately, Arcona Dynamics is going to take workplace dignity very seriously. The afternoon sessions passed in a blur of corporate presentations and networking sessions, but the atmosphere had shifted. Word of Elena's mysterious meetings was spreading through the conference like wildfire, and speculation was running rampant. Who was this woman who commanded such attention from senior staff? How had she gained access to confidential information? And why did she seem so unconcerned about the morning's public humiliation? Jared Pike was beginning to sweat. His triumphant morning was souring as reports filtered back to him about Elena's activities. She had been seen talking to security personnel, conferring with administrative staff, and conducting what appeared to be interviews with employees throughout the building. "This is insane," he confided to his circle of sycophants during the afternoon break. "She's acting like she owns the place. Someone needs to put a stop to this before she causes real problems." "What kind of problems could she cause?" asked Trevor Morrison, another junior executive who had enjoyed the morning's entertainment. "She's nobody, a crazy woman in a stained dress." But even as he said it, Trevor's voice lacked conviction. There was something about Elena's behavior that didn't fit the profile of an unhinged gatecrasher. Her composure was too complete, her actions too purposeful, her knowledge too detailed. Vanessa Cole was having similar concerns. Her afternoon panel had gone well, but she couldn't shake the image of Elena's calm, analytical gaze. It was the look of someone taking inventory, and that thought sent cold fingers of dread down Vanessa's spine. "Find out everything you can about her," she instructed her assistant Mark during a brief private moment. "Full background check, social media, employment history, everything. I want to know who Elena Ward is and why she thinks she can waltz in here and play these games." Mark nodded and hurried away, but Vanessa's unease continued to grow. Something was wrong with this picture. Elena's behavior was too confident, too informed. It was as if she knew something that no one else did. As the afternoon sessions drew to a close, Elena made one final stop. She found herself in the building's executive elevator bank, riding up to the 43rd floor for the first time since arriving that morning. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a sight that made her pause. The executive floor was a temple to corporate power. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Original artwork adorned the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline. At the far end of the corridor, massive oak doors marked the entrance to the chairman's office. Her office, though no one else knew it yet. Elena made her way down the corridor, her footsteps muffled by thick carpeting. Executive assistants and junior staff members looked up from their desks as she passed, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright alarm. Word of the morning's incident had reached every corner of the building, and seeing the coke victim on the executive floor was like spotting a ghost in a cathedral. She paused at the reception desk outside the chairman's office, where a young man in an expensive suit was frantically typing on his computer. "Excuse me," Elena said softly. The young man looked up, his face cycling through several expressions before settling on professional panic. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but this floor is restricted to authorized personnel only. I'm going to have to ask you to—" "I'm looking for Michael Chen," Elena interrupted gently. "I believe he's the interim facilities coordinator for this floor." That's me," Michael replied, his confusion evident. "But I don't understand. How do you know my name? And why are you— I mean, what happened to your dress?" Elena's smile was patient, almost maternal. "Someone decided to make a point about social hierarchies. But that's not why I'm here, Michael. I'm here because I need to prepare this office for a very important announcement." Michael's brow furrowed. "What kind of announcement?" Instead of answering directly, Elena reached into her portfolio and withdrew a key, an old-fashioned brass key that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "This," she said, holding up the key, "opens the chairman's office. And this," she withdrew an official-looking document, "is my authorization to use it." Michael's eyes widened as he read the letterhead on the document. It was from the board of directors, bearing official seals and signatures that he recognized from company communications. "I don't understand," he said weakly. But they said you were—" "They said I was what Michael—" "Just some crazy woman who crashed the party." Elena's laugh was soft but sharp as broken glass. "Is that what they said? How very interesting. And tell me, Michael, does a crazy woman typically have board authorization to access the chairman's office?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Michael stared at the document in his hands, his mind racing to process information that didn't compute with anything he had been told about the morning's events. "Who are you?" he whispered. Elena took the document back and returned it to her portfolio. "I'm someone who believes in accountability, Michael. And in about 90 minutes, everyone in this building is going to understand exactly what that means." She moved toward the oak doors at the end of the corridor, her heels clicking against marble with the steady rhythm of a countdown timer. Michael watched in stunned silence as she inserted the brass key into the lock and turned it with a soft click that seemed to echo through the entire floor. The chairman's office was exactly what Elena had expected, a monument to power and privilege that occupied a corner position with panoramic views of the city. The desk was massive, carved from a single piece of mahogany, and the walls were lined with awards photographs and testimonials from Chicago's business elite. It was a room designed to intimidate, to remind visitors of their place in the corporate hierarchy. Elena moved to the windows and looked out over the city she was about to help reshape. 42 floors below, the afternoon traffic flowed through the streets like blood, through arteries, carrying people to their homes and families, their hopes and dreams, entirely separate from the power games played in corporate towers. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message, and Elena's smile broadened as she read the text that would change everything. "Transfer complete. Chairwoman authority, active as of 4:00 p.m. Announcement prepared for 6:00 p.m. closing ceremony. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Ward." Elena set her phone on the massive desk and opened her portfolio one final time. Inside, neatly organized and meticulously documented, was everything she needed to transform Arcona Dynamics from a culture of cruelty into something worthy of the good people who worked there. In 90 minutes, the closing ceremony would begin. Dr. Webb would take the stage to deliver his traditional remarks about innovation and excellence. And then in front of the assembled business elite of Chicago, Elena Ward would step forward to claim her rightful place as chairwoman. But first, she had one more call to make. Elena dialed a number from memory, her fingers steady, despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. "Daniel," she said when the call connected. "It's me. Yes, I'm in the office now. No, everything went exactly as we expected. Actually, it went better than we expected. They showed me exactly who they are. She paused, listening to her husband's voice on the other end of the line. The closing ceremony starts at 6. Will you be there? Good. I think you're going to find this very educational. Another pause. Trust me, darling. By the end of tonight, Arcona Dynamics is going to be a very different company, and Chicago's business community is going to learn a valuable lesson about the price of cruelty. Elena ended the call and settled into the chairman's chair, her stained dress a stark contrast to the room's opulent surroundings. Outside the windows, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. In just over an hour, the real summit would begin. The chairman's office felt different now that Elena occupied it legitimately. She had spent the last 30 minutes reviewing files that painted a disturbing picture of systematic harassment that went far beyond what she had witnessed that morning. Each document in her growing collection told a story of cruelty, dismissed, dignity destroyed, and complaints buried under layers of corporate bureaucracy. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Elena looked up to see Patricia Manning standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined, carrying a thick folder that seemed to weigh more than its paper contents should. Mrs. Ward, Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper, I have the report you requested. Elena gestured to the chair across from her desk. Please sit. And Patricia, you can call me Elena. Patricia placed the folder on the desk with trembling hands. I've included everything. Every complaint, every incident report, every piece of correspondence related to workplace harassment over the past 2 years. The pattern is worse than I thought. Elena opened the folder, her expression growing darker with each page. 47 formal complaints, 16 informal grievances, and how many resulted in disciplinary action? 3 verbal warnings, 1 written reprimand that was later expunged from the employee's record. Patricia's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong, but Dr. Webb made it clear that these people were untouchable because of their revenue generation. I should have done something, should have spoken up. Patricia. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. You were following orders in a system designed to protect the powerful. That ends today. Before Patricia could respond, Elena's desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Webb's direct line. Yes, Harrison. Elena, thank God I found you. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. Security tells me you're in the chairman's office, and I need you to come down immediately so we can sort this out. Elena's smile was razor sharp. Actually, Harrison, I think I'm exactly where I need to be. A long pause. I don't understand. You will. In about 45 minutes, when the closing ceremony begins, everything will become very clear. She hung up before he could respond, leaving Dr. Webb staring at his phone in bewilderment 3 floors below. Patricia was watching Elena with a mixture of awe and terror. Mrs. Ward, what you're planning? They'll fight back. These people have connections throughout the city. They won't just accept being exposed. Elena's eyes glinted with something that made Patricia shiver. Let them fight. I'm counting on it. The next 20 minutes brought a steady stream of visitors to the chairman's office, each more desperate than the last. Word had spread through the building's executive ranks that something unprecedented was happening, and panic was beginning to set in. Vanessa Cole arrived first, her Chanel suit immaculate, but her composure cracking around the edges. She swept into the office without knocking, her heels clicking against marble like gunshots. All right, enough games, Vanessa announced, her voice sharp with barely controlled fury. I don't know who you think you are or what kind of con you're running, but it ends now. Elena looked up from her documents with polite interest. Vanessa, please have a seat. I'll stand, thank you. Now I've done some checking and Elena Ward isn't registered with any of the major consulting firms in Chicago. You're not listed in any professional directories. Hell, you don't even have a LinkedIn profile. So whatever scam you're pulling, scam. Elena's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. That's an interesting choice of words. Tell me, Vanessa, what exactly do you think I'm trying to gain here? Vanessa's laugh was brittle. Money, obviously. You're probably planning some kind of workplace harassment lawsuit, hoping to cash in on the morning's little incident. Well, let me save you the trouble. Arcona has the best legal team in the city, and they'll destroy you in court. Elena nodded thoughtfully. The best legal team in the city. That's good to know since they'll be working for me. The statement hit Vanessa like a physical blow. For the first time since entering the office, she seemed to notice her surroundings, the way Elena sat behind the chairman's desk, as if she belonged there. The official documents spread across the mahogany surface, the casual authority in her bearing. What did you just say? Elena stood and moved to the window, her stained dress a stark contrast to the opulent office. I said, they'll be working for me, along with everyone else in this building. Vanessa's face cycled through several emotions before settling on rage. You're insane. Actually insane. Security is going to drag you out of here in handcuffs. Are they? Elena turned back to face her. That's curious because I just spoke with Marcus Thompson, and he seemed quite convinced that I have every right to be here. Before Vanessa could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent text. She glanced at the screen and her face went white. Problem? Elena asked mildly. Vanessa's hands were shaking as she typed a response. My assistant just sent me some disturbing information. About you. Vanessa's voice was hollow. About who you really are. Elena smiled. Finally. I was wondering when someone would think to do actual research instead of making assumptions. The door burst open, and Jared Pike stumbled in his earlier confidence, replaced by barely controlled panic. His Brooks Brothers suit was wrinkled, his Princeton-class ring catching the light as he gestured wildly. Vanessa, thank God you're here. We have a problem. A big problem. What kind of problem? Vanessa demanded, though her eyes never left Elena. I just talked to my uncle. You know, the one who sits on half the boards in this city. He made some calls, did some checking. Jared's voice was rising with each word. Elena Ward isn't just some random nobody. She's what Jared... Elena's voice cut through his panic like a blade. Jared turned to face her, his face pale with dawning comprehension. You're Daniel Ward's wife. The founder. Oh God, you're going to be the new chairwoman. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa sank into a chair, as if her legs had given out while Jared stood frozen in the doorway, like a deer caught in headlights. Elena returned to her desk and settled into the chairman's chair with fluid grace. Well, that certainly took longer than I expected. I was beginning to think no one in this organization knew how to conduct basic research. This is impossible, Vanessa whispered. You can't be. You were in the lobby this morning. People were laughing at you. Jared threw coke at you. Yes, he did. Thank you for that reminder, Jared. It will make the closing ceremony much more impactful. Jared's knees buckled, and he collapsed into the nearest chair. The closing ceremony. Elena's smile was serene as a Madonna's. Oh yes. Dr. Webb is planning to make some remarks about corporate culture and excellence. I thought it would be the perfect time for my formal introduction as chairwoman, along with a few observations about the culture I've experienced firsthand today. The blood drained from both their faces as the implications crashed over them like a tsunami. You can't, Vanessa said desperately. It would destroy us. Our careers, our reputations. Your careers built on cruelty. Your reputations founded on bullying and harassment. Elena's voice hardened. Yes, I imagine it would. Jared was hyperventilating. But I didn't know. How could I have known you were just standing there in that cheap dress and you looked so ordinary? Elena's laugh was soft but sharp as winter wind. Ordinary? Yes, I suppose I did. Tell me, Jared, do you think that justifies throwing coke at someone? No, yes. Jared was spiraling into panic. You have to understand, in our world, image matters. People judge you by how you present yourself. I thought you were some kind of stalker or what? Someone who deserved to be humiliated because she didn't meet your aesthetic standards. Vanessa was frantically scrolling through her phone. There has to be a way to fix this. Damage control. We could issue a public apology, make a donation to charity. Could you? Elena's tone was conversational, almost friendly. That's interesting. And would this apology mention the systematic pattern of harassment that's been documented over the past 2 years? The complaints that were buried, the employees who were silenced. Both executives went very still. You know about the complaints. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. Elena gestured to the thick folder on her desk. Every single one. Sarah Martinez's complaint about Jared's accidental coffee spilling. Jennifer Thompson's grievance about your management style. The group complaint from custodial staff about systematic disrespect. She opened the folder and began reading from the top document. March 15th, complaint filed by Sarah Martinez regarding inappropriate behavior by Jared Pike. Complaint dismissed after Mr. Pike's supervisor noted his exceptional revenue performance and suggested Ms. Martinez was oversensitive to normal workplace interactions. Jared made a sound like a wounded animal. Elena continued reading. August 3rd, complaint filed by Jennifer Thompson regarding hostile work environment created by Vanessa Cole. Complaint dismissed after Ms. Cole provided documentation of Ms. Thompson's performance deficiencies and recommended additional sensitivity training. Vanessa was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Should I continue? Elena asked pleasantly. There are 45 more where those came from. The door opened again, and Dr. Webb entered without knocking, his face red with anger and confusion. Elena, what the hell is going on here? I've got board members calling me asking why the new chairwoman is conducting meetings in a stained dress. I've got executives in full panic mode, and I've got rumors flying around this building that would make a tabloid journalist blush. Elena stood to greet him, her manner perfectly professional, despite her disheveled appearance. Harrison, so good to see you. I was just having a conversation with Vanessa and Jared about corporate culture. Webb's eyes darted between the three of them, taking in Vanessa's pale face and Jared's obvious distress. What kind of conversation? The enlightening kind. For instance, I've learned that our definition of excellence apparently includes systematic harassment of employees who don't fit a certain aesthetic profile. Webb's expression shifted to one of careful neutrality. Elena, I think there may be some misunderstandings here. If you've heard rumors or received complaints. Not rumors, Harrison. Documentation. Elena gestured to the folder. 47 formal complaints over 2 years. All dismissed or buried. All involving the same pattern of behavior from the same group of people. Webb glanced at Vanessa and Jared, his expression darkening. We can discuss this privately. Actually, I think it's time we discussed it publicly. The closing ceremony begins in 20 minutes, and I believe our guests deserve to understand exactly what kind of culture they've been celebrating. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Webb, Vanessa, and Jared exchanged looks of pure terror. Elena, Webb said carefully, I understand you may be upset about this morning's incident, but surely we can handle this internally. There's no need to air dirty laundry in front of the entire Chicago business community. Elena moved back to the window, gazing out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Dirty laundry. Is that what we're calling it? Not accountability, not justice, just inconvenient truths that might embarrass us in front of our peers. She turned back to face them, and something in her expression made all three executives step backward. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Harrison. In 15 minutes, you're going to take that stage and deliver your remarks about innovation and excellence. You're going to talk about our commitment to creating a workplace where everyone can thrive. And then you're going to introduce Arcona Dynamics' new chairwoman. Webb's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Elena, please, think about what you're doing. These people, he gestured toward Vanessa and Jared. They made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But destroying their careers won't undo what happened. You're right, Elena said softly. Nothing can undo what happened. Not just to me, but to every employee who has been humiliated, dismissed, or silenced over the past 2 years. She moved to her desk and picked up a particular document from the folder. This is from Beverly, Washington, one of our custodial staff. She filed a complaint 6 months ago about being called the help by senior executives and having her requests for basic respect ignored. The complaint was dismissed because, and I quote, custodial staff should focus on their assigned duties rather than interpersonal sensitivities. Elena looked up at the 3 men staring at her in horror. Beverly has worked for this company for 12 years. She has 2 children in college and a husband recovering from cancer. She deserves better than to be treated as invisible by people who think their paychecks buy them the right to dismiss her humanity. Jared was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Please, I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll donate my bonus to charity. I'll take sensitivity training. You'll do all of those things, Elena agreed. But first, you'll face the consequences of your choices. The conference hall was packed to capacity as Dr. Webb took the stage for the closing ceremony. 500 of Chicago's business elite filled the auditorium, their conversations creating a low buzz of anticipation. The day's events had generated unusual excitement, with rumors swirling about mysterious meetings and unprecedented drama in the upper floors. Webb gripped the podium like a man drowning his knuckles white against the dark wood. His prepared remarks about innovation and excellence felt like ashes in his mouth, knowing what was coming. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Thank you for joining us for this year's Cultural Summit. Today, we've explored themes of leadership innovation and the kind of workplace excellence that defines Arcona Dynamics. Polite applause rippled through the audience. In the back row, Elena sat quietly in her stained dress, invisible to most of the crowd, but fully visible to the few who knew what was coming. As we conclude today's proceedings, Webb continued, I have a very special announcement to make. It is my honor to introduce someone who will be leading Arcona Dynamics into its next chapter of growth and innovation. The audience leaned forward with interest. Board transitions were major news in Chicago's business community. Please join me in welcoming our new chairwoman, Elena Ward. The applause began automatically, then faltered as Elena rose from her seat in the back row. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as they took in her appearance, the same stained dress from the morning's incident, the same simple brown hair, the same unremarkable features that had made her invisible just hours earlier. As Elena walked down the aisle toward the stage, recognition dawned on face after face. This was the woman who had been humiliated in the lobby, the nobody who had been laughed at, dismissed, and degraded, the victim of their morning's entertainment. The silence was deafening as Elena climbed the steps to the stage. When she reached the podium, she paused for a moment, looking out over the sea of shocked faces. Many of them were holding phones, already recording what they sensed would be a historic moment. Good evening, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. I suspect many of you recognize me, though perhaps not in the context you were expecting. Nervous laughter scattered through the crowd. This morning, I walked into this building as a newcomer. I wanted to observe the culture of Arcona Dynamics firsthand before formally assuming my role as chairwoman. I wanted to understand how this organization treats people, particularly people who might seem different, vulnerable, or powerless. The laughter died completely. In the front row, Jared Pike had gone chalk white, while Vanessa Cole was staring at her hands as if she could make herself disappear. What I discovered was both heartbreaking and illuminating. I discovered an organization where cruelty has been normalized, where dignity is conditional, and where power has been used not to lift people up, but to tear them down. Elena paused, letting her words sink in. The auditorium was so quiet that the sound of the ventilation system seemed deafening. This morning, a young man threw a glass of Coca-Cola at me because he decided I didn't belong here. Because my dress wasn't expensive enough. My appearance wasn't polished enough. My presence wasn't worthy of respect. She gestured toward Jared, who was visibly shaking in his seat. That young man is Jared Pike, one of our promising junior executives. And the remarkable thing isn't that he chose to humiliate someone he perceived as powerless. The remarkable thing is that dozens of people watched him do it, and they laughed. The camera phones were out in force now, recording every word. Elena could see the horror on faces throughout the crowd as they realized the magnitude of what was being revealed. They laughed because they believed that person that I deserved to be humiliated. They laughed because they have created a culture where cruelty is entertainment, where dignity is earned through economic status, and where basic human respect is conditional on fitting their aesthetic preferences. Elena reached into her portfolio and withdrew the thick folder that had been compiled over the past hours. But this morning's incident wasn't isolated. It was symptomatic of a pattern that has poisoned this organization for years. This folder contains 47 formal complaints of harassment, discrimination, and workplace bullying filed over the past 2 years. 47 voices crying out for basic dignity and respect. She opened the folder and began to read. Sarah Martinez, IT support specialist, complained about repeated incidents of accidental food and beverage spills by senior staff. Complaint dismissed. Each name she read landed like a hammer blow. The audience was frozen, horrified by the systematic nature of what was being revealed. Jennifer Thompson, Junior Marketing Coordinator, reported a pattern of public humiliation and impossible demands designed to force her resignation. Complaint dismissed. Elena's voice never wavered, never rose, never betrayed emotion. She simply read the names and the injustices with the steady rhythm of a funeral bell. Beverly Washington custodial staff reported being treated as invisible by executives who refused to acknowledge her presence or respond to basic greetings. Complaint dismissed. The litany continued, each case building upon the last, creating a picture of systematic cruelty that made the audience increasingly uncomfortable. Some people were crying. Others were staring at their phones, no doubt checking their own behavior against what was being described. When Elena finished reading, she closed the folder and looked out over the stunned crowd. Every single one of these complaints was dismissed. Every voice was silenced. Every plea for dignity was ignored, because the people responsible for these actions were deemed too valuable to discipline. Their revenue generation was considered more important than the humanity of their victims. She paused, letting the weight of this sink in. Well, I'm here to tell you that changes today. Effective immediately, Arcona Dynamics will have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment, bullying, and any form of workplace cruelty. We will investigate every complaint thoroughly and transparently. We will hold everyone accountable regardless of their position or their contribution to our bottom line. The applause that erupted was thunderous, but uncertain people weren't sure if they should be cheering or running for the exits. But accountability isn't just about punishment, Elena continued when the noise died down. It's also about recognition. It's about lifting up the people who have shown true character in the face of adversity. She gestured toward the back of the auditorium. Beverly Washington, would you please stand? A middle-aged black woman in a custodial uniform rose slowly from her seat, her face streaked with tears. The audience turned to look at her, many seeing her clearly for the first time, despite her years of service to the organization. Beverly has worked for Arcona Dynamics for 12 years. She has been insulted, ignored, and treated as less than human by people who should have known better. But she has never let that cruelty dim her own light. She has continued to treat everyone she encounters with dignity and respect. Elena looked directly at Beverly. Effective Monday, Beverly Washington will be our new Director of Workplace Culture, with full authority to investigate complaints and implement changes needed to ensure every employee is treated with the respect they deserve. The applause this time was genuine and sustained. Beverly was sobbing, openly overwhelmed by the recognition and the opportunity to make real change. Marcus Thompson, our facilities coordinator, showed integrity and courage when he helped preserve evidence of this morning's incident. He will be promoted to Director of Operations. More applause. Marcus, sitting near Beverly, looked stunned by his sudden elevation. Sarah Martinez, who filed one of those dismissed complaints, will be heading our new IT Security and Ethics Division, with responsibility for ensuring transparency in all our digital communications and record-keeping. Elena continued down her list, promoting and recognizing employees who had shown character while being dismissed or ignored by the existing power structure. With each announcement, the audience grew more emotional, some crying with joy for the recognition of people they had overlooked, others weeping with shame for their own complicity in the culture of cruelty. When she finished with the promotions, Elena's expression grew grave again. But recognition must be balanced with accountability. Jared Pike will be suspended, pending a full investigation of his conduct. If he wishes to continue with this organization, he will need to complete a comprehensive program of education and restitution, including personal apologies to every person he has harmed. Jared was openly sobbing now, his career and reputation in ruins. Vanessa Cole will also be suspended pending investigation. Her pattern of systematically undermining and humiliating subordinates ends today. Vanessa hadn't moved since Elena began speaking, sitting frozen like a statue as her world collapsed around her. And finally, Elena said, her voice growing softer but more dangerous. Any employee at any level who continues to participate in the culture of cruelty we are dismantling will find their future with this organization very brief indeed. She closed her portfolio and stepped back from the podium, but the audience remained silent, waiting for more. You came here today for a summit on corporate culture, Elena said finally. I hope you found it educational, because what you witnessed this morning, the casual cruelty, the laughter at another person's humiliation, the assumption that dignity is conditional, that culture exists in organizations throughout this city. Her gaze swept across the packed auditorium. The question each of you needs to answer is simple. What kind of culture will you accept? What kind of behavior will you tolerate? And what kind of person will you choose to be when you think no one important is watching? Elena looked out over the sea of faces one final time. Thank you for your attention. And thank you for showing me exactly what needed to change. As she stepped away from the podium, the auditorium exploded in chaos. Some people were applauding wildly. Others were rushing for the exits. Many were frantically texting and calling, no doubt trying to manage their own exposure to similar cultural problems. But in the midst of the chaos, Elena remained calm. She had accomplished what she set out to do. The culture of cruelty that had poisoned Arcona Dynamics was dead, and in its place, something better could finally grow. The revolution had begun with a glass of Coca-Cola thrown in contempt. It would end with dignity restored and justice served. And this was only the beginning. As Elena descended from the stage, the auditorium remained in controlled chaos. Business cards were being hastily exchanged as executives tried to distance themselves from the toxic culture she had exposed, while others scrambled to align themselves with what they sensed would be a new order. But Elena's attention was focused on a figure emerging from the crowd near the back of the hall. Daniel Ward moved through the assembly with the quiet confidence of a man who had built empires. At 62, he carried himself with the bearing of someone who had earned every gray hair and worry line through decades of principled leadership. His navy suit was impeccably tailored, but understated, and his eyes, the same intelligent brown as his wife's, were fixed on Elena with unmistakable pride. The crowd parted before him, like water recognition rippling through the assembled executives. This was the founder, the visionary, who had built Arcona Dynamics from a two-person consulting firm into one of Chicago's premier business institutions. His presence added weight to everything that had just transpired. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena said, returning to the microphone as her husband approached the stage, "I'd like you to meet Daniel Ward, founder of Arcona Dynamics and my husband of 28 years. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. Not only was Elena the new chairwoman, but she was married to the man who had created the company they all aspired to work with or for. The implications were staggering. Every laugh at her humiliation, every moment of cruel entertainment, had been witnessed by the founder himself through his wife's eyes. Daniel climbed the steps to join Elena, his movements deliberate and measured. When he reached the podium, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes about their partnership. 28 years ago, Daniel said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in business. "I founded this company on a simple principle that excellence in business must be matched by excellence in character. Today my wife has reminded us all what that principle actually means." The audience hung on every word, sensing that more revelations were coming. When Elena agreed to accept the chairwoman position, we decided she should conduct what we called a cultural audit, spending time in the organization as an ordinary employee to understand how our principles were being lived out in practice. Jared Pike was hyperventilating audibly now, the full scope of his mistake crashing over him like a tsunami. He hadn't just thrown coke at a random woman, he had assaulted the founder's wife while she was conducting an official evaluation of company culture. What she discovered, Daniel continued, was that we had allowed success to corrupt our values. We had created an environment where money mattered more than morality, where revenue excused cruelty, and where power was used to diminish rather than elevate. His gaze swept across the crowd, and several executives shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. That ends today. Not just the behavior itself, but the systems that enabled it, and the culture that celebrated it. Elena stepped forward again, her stained dress now a symbol of something much larger than personal humiliation. "We're not just changing policies," she said. "We're changing the fundamental assumption that business success requires moral compromise." As if orchestrated, the auditorium doors opened, and a stream of people began filing in, the very employees whose complaints had been dismissed, whose voices had been silenced, whose dignity had been treated as expendable. Beverly Washington led the procession, no longer in her custodial uniform, but wearing a simple black dress that transformed her from invisible service worker to visible leader. Behind her came Sarah Martinez from IT, Marcus Thompson from Facilities, Jennifer Thompson from Marketing, and dozens of others whose names had been read from Elena's folder of shame. They took seats in the front rows that had been vacated by fleeing executives, their presence a powerful statement about whose voices would be centered going forward. "These are the people who make Arcona Dynamics actually function," Elena announced. "They clean our offices, fix our computers, coordinate our events, and handle the 1,000 daily tasks that keep us operating. And starting Monday, their perspective will be central to every major decision we make. She gestured to Beverly, who stood with quiet dignity. Beverly Washington will chair our new Cultural Oversight Committee with full authority to investigate complaints and implement changes. She will report directly to the Board of Directors, bypassing traditional management structures that have failed to protect our people. The symbolism was unmistakable. The woman who had been treated as invisible would now oversee the visibility and treatment of everyone else. But Elena wasn't finished. She reached into her portfolio and withdrew another document, this one bearing the seal of the Chicago Board of Ethics. This morning's incident was recorded by building security cameras from multiple angles. That footage has been provided to the Chicago Board of Ethics as evidence of workplace harassment. But more importantly, it will be made available to any organization considering hiring individuals who participated in or encouraged this morning's cruelty. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Career-ending behavior had consequences that extended far beyond a single company, and everyone present understood that their response to Elena's humiliation was now part of their permanent professional record. Vanessa Cole finally found her voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. "You can't do this. It will destroy innocent people who were just caught up in the moment." Elena's smile was gentle but implacable. "Innocent people, Vanessa. Is that what we're calling the dozens of executives who laughed while I was degraded? The people who pulled out their phones to record my humiliation for their entertainment?" She gestured toward the cameras that had captured every moment of the closing ceremony. "Today's speech is being live-streamed to business schools throughout the Midwest. Tomorrow's leaders are watching how today's leaders respond when their true character is revealed." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about Arcona dynamics anymore. It was becoming a case study in corporate accountability that would influence business education for years to come. Daniel stepped forward again, his expression grave. "For those wondering about the legal implications of what we're discussing, let me be clear. Elena's experience this morning constitutes workplace harassment under both Illinois state law and federal employment regulations. The systematic pattern of behavior documented in her report represents a hostile work environment that exposes this company to significant liability." The lawyers in the audience were frantically taking notes, no doubt calculating the potential exposure their own organizations might face for similar cultural problems. However, Daniel continued, "We're not interested in litigation. We're interested in transformation. Any employee willing to acknowledge their mistakes, make genuine amends, and commit to cultural change will have the opportunity to rebuild their career here." This was the olive branch, the chance for redemption that separated genuine leadership from mere revenge. But the conditions were clear: accountability first, then opportunity. Elena opened her portfolio again and withdrew what appeared to be a standard employment contract. "Jared Pike, would you please join us on stage?" Jared remained frozen in his seat, his face ashen with terror. "Mr. Pike." Daniel's voice carried the authority of absolute command. "You have a choice to make. You can leave this auditorium and spend the rest of your career explaining to potential employers why video footage exists of you assaulting the chairwoman of a major corporation. Or you can come up here and begin the process of making amends." Slowly, painfully, Jared rose from his seat and walked toward the stage on unsteady legs. The walk felt eternal, every step witnessed by hundreds of people who would remember this moment for the rest of their careers. When he reached the microphone, Jared's voice was barely audible. I don't know what to say." "Start with the truth," Elena suggested gently. "What were you thinking when you threw that Coke at me?" Jared's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. I thought you were nobody. I thought you didn't matter. I thought it would be funny to put you in your place. The brutal honesty was more damaging than any denial could have been. He had revealed the core assumption that drove the toxic culture that some people simply didn't matter. And now, Elena prompted, now I understand that I was everything wrong with this company. I was cruel because I could be. I was cruel because it made me feel powerful. And I was cruel because no one had ever told me it was unacceptable. Elena nodded. That's a beginning. Here's what happens next, Jared. You're suspended without pay for 30 days. During that time, you'll complete a comprehensive program on workplace harassment, unconscious bias, and ethical leadership. You'll also perform 100 hours of community service with organizations that serve the people you've dismissed as nobody. She held up the contract. If you complete these requirements successfully, you can return to Arcona Dynamics, not as a junior executive, but as an entry-level employee, earning minimum wage. You'll work your way back up by demonstrating genuine character change, not by leveraging connections or privilege. The offer was generous and humiliating in equal measure, a chance at redemption that required complete ego destruction first. Do you accept these terms? Elena asked. Jared nodded through his tears. Yes, thank you. Don't thank me, Jared. Thank the people whose dignity you helped restore by accepting accountability. As Jared signed the contract with shaking hands, Elena turned her attention to Vanessa Cole, who had remained frozen in her seat throughout the exchange. Vanessa, your situation is more complex. Your behavior wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a systematic pattern of workplace bullying that spans years and affects dozens of employees. Vanessa finally stood, her designer suit impeccable, but her composure completely shattered. Elena, please. I have a family. I have responsibilities. My reputation? Your reputation, Elena interrupted, was built on the tears of people you considered beneath you. The question is whether you're capable of building a new one based on different values. She gestured to Beverly Washington, who approached the stage with quiet dignity. Beverly, you filed a complaint about Ms. Cole's treatment of custodial staff. Would you like to address her directly? Beverly took the microphone with steady hands, her voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. Ms. Cole, for 6 months, I tried to get your attention about basic respect. I asked for simple acknowledgement when I cleaned your office. I requested that you not refer to me as the help in front of clients. I wanted to be treated like a human being. Vanessa's face crumpled as the weight of her casual cruelty was laid bare. Instead, Beverly continued, you filed a complaint about my over-familiarity and suggested I needed retraining on appropriate workplace boundaries. You tried to have me fired for asking to be treated with dignity. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. This wasn't abstract policy discussion. This was one human being confronting another about fundamental respect. I forgive you, Beverly said finally. But forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. It means I'm not going to let your cruelty poison my heart. Elena stepped forward as Beverly returned the microphone. Vanessa Cole, you're terminated from Arcona Dynamics, effective immediately. Your systematic pattern of harassment creates too much liability for us to continue your employment under any circumstances. The finality of the statement hit the auditorium like a physical blow. Vanessa Cole, one of Chicago's rising business stars, had been destroyed by her own cruelty in front of hundreds of witnesses. But Elena wasn't finished. However, we're not just going to discard you. Over the next 6 months, Arcona Dynamics will fund your participation in a comprehensive rehabilitation program focused on leadership accountability and workplace ethics. If you complete this program successfully and demonstrate genuine change, we'll provide a letter of recommendation for future employment. Even in termination, Elena was offering a path to redemption, but one that required genuine transformation rather than superficial apology. As security escorted Vanessa from the building, Elena turned her attention back to the broader audience. Many executives had left during the proceedings, no doubt rushing back to their own organizations to conduct damage control. But those who remained seemed to understand they were witnessing something historic. "Dr. Webb," Elena called to the CEO, who had been standing frozen near the side of the stage. "Please join us." Harrison Webb approached the microphone like a man walking to his execution. His earlier confidence had evaporated completely, replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of someone watching their world collapse. "Harrison, you've been CEO of Arcona Dynamics for 3 years. During that time, 47 formal complaints of workplace harassment were filed with your office. How many resulted in meaningful disciplinary action?" Webb's voice was barely audible. 3 verbal warnings. 1 written reprimand that was later expunged. And why do you think that was the case? Webb looked out over the audience, many of whom he had worked with for years. "Because I prioritized revenue over respect. Because I told myself that difficult personalities were acceptable if they delivered results. Because I was a coward who chose convenience over character." The self-indictment was complete and devastating. A man who had built his career on decisive leadership was publicly acknowledging his moral failure. "Harrison, you're not terminated," Elena said, her voice gentle but firm. "But your role is changing. Effective Monday, you'll serve as Chief Operating Officer reporting to our new CEO." She gestured toward Beverly Washington, who was returning to the stage with quiet composure. "Beverly Washington will serve as interim CEO while we conduct a national search for permanent leadership. Her first priority will be implementing our new Cultural Excellence Initiative, a comprehensive program to ensure every employee is treated with dignity and respect." The symbolism was profound and intentional. The woman who had been dismissed as the help would now lead one of Chicago's premier business institutions. Success would be redefined not just by profit margins, but by how well the organization honored the humanity of every person who walked through its doors. As Beverly took the podium, her transformation from invisible worker to visible leader was complete. 24 hours ago, she said, her voice steady and strong, "I was someone most of you had never seen, despite cleaning your offices for 12 years. Today, I stand before you, not as proof of my worth, I always had worth, but as evidence that every person in every organization has value that extends far beyond their job title." The applause was thunderous and sustained a sound that seemed to wash away years of accumulated cruelty and replace it with something approaching hope. Elena stepped forward for her final remarks, her stained dress now transformed from symbol of humiliation to emblem of transformation. "In 6 months, we'll host another cultural summit. But this time, the speakers won't be talking about theoretical best practices. They'll be sharing real stories of how dignity was restored, how voices were elevated, and how power was used to lift people up rather than tear them down." She paused, looking out over the assembly one final time. "You all came here expecting to network with Chicago's business elite. Instead, you witnessed the birth of a new kind of elite, one defined not by wealth or connections, but by character and compassion." As Elena stepped away from the podium, the auditorium erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. But she wasn't listening to the ovation anymore. Her attention was focused on the faces in the front row, Beverly Sarah Marcus, and dozens of others whose voices had finally been heard, whose dignity had been restored, whose worth had been recognized. This was what victory looked like, not the destruction of enemies, but the elevation of the previously invisible. Not revenge against cruelty, but the creation of something better in its place. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena felt Daniel's hand slip into hers, a gesture of partnership that had sustained them through nearly 3 decades of marriage and would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The cultural audit was complete. The revolution had succeeded, and tomorrow, the real work of transformation would begin. But for tonight, it was enough to stand in the middle of a room where dignity had triumphed over cruelty, where character had defeated convenience, and where one woman's quiet strength had toppled a kingdom built on the tears of the powerless. The coke stain on Elena's dress was still visible, a permanent reminder of the morning's cruelty. But it had been transformed from badge of shame to symbol of triumph, proof that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is simply to refuse to be broken by it. In the end, they had learned that true power wasn't the ability to humiliate others, but the strength to maintain your dignity when others tried to strip it away. And that lesson would echo through the corridors of corporate America long after the last guest had left the building. The summit was over. The transformation had begun, and Elena Ward, the quiet woman in the stained dress, had changed not just a company, but an entire understanding of what leadership could be. The weeks following the cultural summit transformed Arcona dynamics in ways that rippled far beyond Chicago's business district. Elena had moved into the chairman's office permanently, though she had replaced the intimidating mahogany desk with a simple conference table where she held daily meetings with employees from every level of the organization. The stained navy dress hung framed on her office wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that dignity could triumph over cruelty. Beverly Washington's transition to CEO had been seamless in ways that surprised even Elena. On her first Monday morning as interim chief executive, Beverly had walked through every floor of the building, greeting employees by name and asking about their families, their concerns, their ideas for improvement. The transformation was immediate and profound. People who had felt invisible for years suddenly found themselves seen, heard, and valued. "Mrs. Ward," Beverly said during their morning briefing 3 weeks after the summit, "we've received over 200 applications for positions that haven't even been posted yet. Word is spreading through Chicago that we're building something different here." Elena smiled as she reviewed the latest employee satisfaction surveys. The numbers were unprecedented. Turnover had dropped by 70%. Productivity was up across all departments. And most remarkably, voluntary reports of workplace issues had increased dramatically as people learned they would actually be heard. "Any word from our suspended employees?" Elena asked. Beverly's expression grew thoughtful. Jared Pike completed his first week of community service at the homeless shelter. The director called personally to say she's never seen someone work so hard to understand perspectives he'd never considered before. Elena nodded. Genuine transformation took time, but the early signs were encouraging. And Vanessa, enrolled in the leadership rehabilitation program you recommended. Her therapist says she's beginning to understand how her childhood trauma manifested as workplace cruelty. Beverly paused. "Do you really think people can change that fundamentally?" Elena's gaze moved to the window, where she could see construction crews working on the new employee wellness center that would occupy an entire floor of the building. "I think people change when they finally understand the cost of staying the same." The morning's first surprise came in the form of Marcus Thompson, who appeared in Elena's doorway with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Mrs. Ward, you need to see this," he said, holding up his tablet. "The Chicago Tribune just published their investigation into workplace culture across the city's major corporations. It's incredible." Elena read over the headline, "The Ward Effect: How One Woman's Courage Sparked a Citywide Reckoning." The article detailed how dozens of Chicago businesses had launched their own cultural audits in the weeks following Arcona's transformation, with several executives voluntarily stepping down after examining their own behavior. "Listen to this." Marcus continued reading from the article. "The video of your closing ceremony speech has been viewed over 3 million times and is being used in business ethics courses at Northwestern, University of Chicago, and DePaul. Harvard Business School has requested permission to develop a case study around what they're calling the Arkona model. Elena felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. The ripple effects were extending far beyond what she had imagined possible. But the day's real revelation came during the afternoon board meeting, when Patricia Manning entered the conference room with a visitor who made Elena's breath catch. "Mrs. Ward," Patricia announced, "this is Dr. Rachel Kim from the Federal Department of Labor. She's here about the anonymous tip we received this morning." Dr. Kim was a slight woman in her 40s, with the precise bearing of a career investigator. She placed a thick folder on the table, with the careful attention of someone handling evidence. "Mrs. Ward, someone contacted our office with allegations that Arkona Dynamics was part of a larger network of companies that had been systematically suppressing harassment complaints across multiple organizations in Chicago." Elena's mind raced. The cultural problems at Arkona had been extensive, but the suggestion of a coordinated cover-up across multiple companies was something entirely different. "What kind of network?" Elena asked carefully. Dr. Kim opened her folder, revealing a complex organizational chart that connected dozens of Chicago's most prestigious firms through shared board members, legal representatives, and consulting relationships. "According to our source, there's been an informal agreement among these organizations to suppress negative publicity about workplace culture. Complaints would be buried, accusers would be quietly transferred or terminated, and problem executives would be moved between companies rather than being held accountable." The implications were staggering. What Elena had thought was isolated toxicity at Arkona was apparently part of a much larger system designed to protect the powerful at the expense of everyone else. "Who provided this information?" Elena asked. Dr. Kim's smile was grim. "Someone who identified themselves only as a former victim who found her voice. The documentation is extensive and appears authentic. We're launching a federal investigation, but we wanted to inform you since Arkona Dynamics appears to be the first organization to actually break free from this network." Elena's phone buzzed with an urgent text from Daniel. "Turn on Channel 7 News, now." The conference room television revealed why. Vanessa Cole stood at a podium outside the federal building flanked by 3 other women. Elena didn't recognize all of them, holding thick folders similar to Dr. Kim's. 6 months ago, Vanessa was saying, her voice steady but emotional. "I was terminated from Arkona Dynamics for creating a hostile work environment. At the time, I was angry, humiliated, and convinced I was being treated unfairly." Elena leaned forward, riveted by what she was hearing. "But the rehabilitation program Elena Ward required me to complete opened my eyes to something much larger than my own behavior. I discovered that my actions weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a systematic culture of cruelty that extended across dozens of Chicago's most prominent businesses." Vanessa held up her folder. "Today, I'm providing federal investigators with documentation of what can only be described as a conspiracy to suppress workplace harassment complaints. Over the past 5 years, at least 12 major corporations have collaborated to move problem executives between organizations, bury legitimate complaints, and silence victims through intimidation and financial pressure." Elena felt the world shift around her. Vanessa Cole, the woman she had fired for systematic bullying, had become a whistleblower exposing corruption that dwarfed anything Elena had imagined. The transformation at Arkona Dynamics under Elena Ward's leadership showed me what workplace culture could be when leaders chose character over convenience. But it also made me realize how many other organizations were still trapped in the toxic system I had helped perpetuate. The camera zoomed in on Vanessa's face, which showed the kind of peace that comes from finally telling the truth. "Elena Ward saved my soul by holding me accountable. Today, I'm trying to save other people's careers by exposing the system that nearly destroyed mine. Dr. Kim was taking rapid notes as she watched the broadcast. This corroborates everything in our anonymous tip. If Ms. Cole's documentation is as comprehensive as she suggests, we're looking at the largest workplace harassment cover-up in federal history. Elena's phone rang with Daniel's number. Elena, are you watching this? Yes. Daniel. Did you know Vanessa was going to? No, but I'm not surprised. The rehabilitation program you insisted on was designed to help people understand the systemic nature of workplace toxicity. It looks like Vanessa understood better than any of us realized. Elena sank into her chair as the implications washed over her. The cultural audit that had begun with a glass of Coke thrown in cruelty was now exposing corruption that reached into the highest levels of Chicago's business community. The afternoon brought a steady stream of reporters, investigators, and business leaders seeking to understand how Arkona dynamics had become the catalyst for such a massive reckoning. Elena found herself giving interview after interview, each one helping her understand the full scope of what they had unleashed. Mrs. Ward, asked Janet Morrison from the Chicago Business Journal, when you decided to conduct that cultural audit, did you have any idea it would lead to a federal investigation? Elena considered the question carefully. I knew our culture needed to change. I didn't realize that culture was connected to something much larger and more dangerous. What's your response to critics who say you've destroyed the careers of good people who made honest mistakes? Elena's expression hardened slightly. There's nothing honest about systematically silencing victims of harassment. There's nothing good about people who build their success on the tears of others. And there are no mistakes when the cruelty is that deliberate and sustained. The interview was interrupted by Beverly Washington, who appeared with an expression of barely contained amazement. Elena, you need to hear this. Jared Pike just called. He's at the homeless shelter, and something extraordinary happened. Elena gestured for the camera crew to pause recording. What kind of extraordinary? Beverly's smile was radiant. He was serving lunch when he recognized one of the clients, a woman named Susan Martinez. She used to work at Arkona in accounting before she was forced out 3 years ago after filing a harassment complaint. Elena's heart clenched. Susan Martinez. One of the names from the buried files. One of the voices that had been silenced. Jared spent his entire lunch break apologizing to her and listening to her story. She's been homeless for 2 years, unable to find steady employment because of the negative references that followed her complaint. Beverly paused, her voice thick with emotion. Jared called his uncle, the one with all the board connections, and demanded he help find Susan a job. Not just any job, but a position commensurate with her qualifications and experience. Elena felt tears pricking her eyes. This was what genuine accountability looked like, not just accepting punishment, but actively working to repair the damage caused by previous actions. There's more, Beverly continued. Jared has identified 17 other former employees who were forced out after filing complaints. He's creating what he calls a restoration fund to help them rebuild their careers. The transformation was more profound than Elena had dared hope. The young man who had thrown Coke at her in casual cruelty was now dedicating his resources to repairing lives damaged by the toxic system he had participated in. As the sun began to set over Chicago, Elena found herself on the building's rooftop garden, a space that had been converted from executive parking into a peaceful retreat where employees could decompress from the stresses of corporate life. She had come here to think, to process the day's revelations, and to prepare for what was clearly going to be a much larger battle than she had originally anticipated. Daniel found her there, as she had known he would. After 28 years of marriage, they had developed an almost telepathic ability to sense when the other needed companionship or solitude. Quite a day, he said, settling onto the bench beside her. Quite a month, Elena corrected. Daniel, when we planned this cultural audit, we thought we were fixing one company's problems. We had no idea we were pulling the thread that would unravel an entire system of corruption. Daniel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the comfortable intimacy of decades. Are you having second thoughts? Elena considered the question seriously. The federal investigation would bring intense scrutiny, potential legal challenges, and almost certainly some form of retaliation from the powerful interests being exposed. The simple life she had enjoyed as a behind-the-scenes partner was over forever. No, she said finally, but I'm realizing this is just the beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mrs. Ward, my name is Jennifer Chen. I work for Morrison & Associates downtown. After watching your press conference, I need to tell you about what's been happening at our firm. I think you'll want to see the documents I've been secretly collecting for 2 years. The system is bigger than anyone realizes. Elena showed the message to Daniel, who whistled softly. How many more companies do you think are involved? Before Elena could answer, her phone buzzed again. Then again. And again. In the space of 5 minutes, she received similar messages from employees at 8 different organizations, all describing systematic harassment, buried complaints, and coordinated cover-ups. All of them, Elena said quietly. I think all of them are involved. The next morning brought news that would transform the story from local scandal to national crisis. Patricia Manning knocked on Elena's office door at 7 a.m., her face pale with shock. Elena, you need to see the Washington Post headline. The newspaper's website displayed a banner that made Elena's blood run cold. Chicago Harassment Network, connected to federal contractors. Congressional investigation launched. The article revealed that several of the companies implicated in the Chicago cover-up held significant federal contracts, meaning taxpayer dollars had been funding organizations that systematically silenced harassment victims. Congressional subpoenas were already being prepared. It gets worse, Patricia continued. Senator Elizabeth Warren's office called. She wants to hold hearings on corporate accountability, and they're specifically requesting your testimony about how these networks operate. Elena sank into her chair, the full weight of what they had unleashed, finally hitting her. This wasn't just about changing one company's culture anymore. It was about fundamentally altering how American businesses operated. Her contemplation was interrupted by a commotion in the outer office. Through her open door, Elena could see Beverly Washington engaged in an animated conversation with a group of visitors she didn't recognize. Elena, Beverly called, you need to meet these people. The delegation consisted of 4 women and 2 men, all wearing simple business attire and carrying themselves with the quiet dignity Elena had learned to associate with people who had survived workplace trauma. Mrs. Ward, said the eldest woman, introducing herself as Dr. Maria Santos. We represent the National Alliance of Workplace Harassment Survivors. We've been watching what you've accomplished here at Arcona, and we need your help. Dr. Santos explained that their organization had been documenting similar harassment networks in cities across the country. Atlanta, Denver, Phoenix, Seattle, all following the same pattern of suppressed complaints, transferred executives, and silenced victims. Chicago isn't unique, Dr. Santos continued. It's just the first network to be exposed. We estimate that similar systems exist in at least 20 major metropolitan areas affecting hundreds of thousands of employees. Elena felt simultaneously horrified and oddly relieved. The scope of the problem was enormous, but at least now they understood what they were actually fighting. What do you need from us? Elena asked. We need the Arcona model to be replicated nationwide. We need companies to understand that cultural transformation is possible, and we need executives to realize that accountability is inevitable. Elena looked around the room at faces that reflected her own mix of determination and trepidation. They were no longer just fixing one company. They were sparking a movement that could reshape corporate America. The afternoon brought the day's most surprising visitor. Security called to announce that Jared Pike was requesting a meeting, having completed his 30-day suspension and rehabilitation requirements ahead of schedule. When he entered Elena's office, the transformation was remarkable. The arrogant young man who had thrown coke at her 6 weeks earlier had been replaced by someone who carried himself with genuine humility. His expensive suit had been traded for simple khakis and a button-down shirt, and his eyes held the clarity that comes from genuine self-reflection. "Mrs. Ward," he began, his voice steady but emotional, "I need to tell you what I've learned." Elena gestured for him to sit, noting how he chose the chair closest to her, rather than maintaining the physical distance that had once reflected his sense of superiority. "During my community service, I met dozens of people whose lives had been destroyed by the kind of casual cruelty I thought was normal. But more than that, I discovered that many of them had worked for companies in our network. The homeless woman I served lunch to every day. She was an accountant at Morrison & Associates before filing a harassment complaint. The man who taught me to sort donations. He was a brilliant engineer at Bradley Systems, until he was forced out for attitude problems after reporting his supervisor." Jared's voice was gaining strength as he spoke, as if telling the truth was physically empowering. "Mrs. Ward, the rehabilitation program made me understand that I wasn't just a bully. I was a cog in a machine designed to destroy people who threatened the status quo. And now, I want to help dismantle that machine." Elena studied him carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving calculation. What she saw was something she hadn't expected: genuine moral awakening. "What did you have in mind?" Jared reached into his simple canvas messenger bag and withdrew a thumb drive. "I've been thinking about my connections, my access to information, my understanding of how these networks operate. I may have been low-level, but I was connected to high-level people who trusted me with sensitive information." He held up the drive. "This contains every email, text message, and document I can remember that relates to the harassment cover-up network. Names, dates, financial transfers, explicit instructions about how to silence complaints." Elena's breath caught. If Jared's documentation was as comprehensive as he suggested, it could provide the smoking gun that federal investigators needed to prove conspiracy. "There's more," Jared continued. "I'm not the only one. Trevor Morrison, who you saw laughing during the lobby incident, he called me yesterday. He wants to provide similar documentation about the network's operations at Bradley Systems." Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented: the systematic conversion of the network's own operatives into whistleblowers. The culture of accountability they had created was spreading exponentially. The day's final revelation came as Elena was preparing to leave the office. Beverly Washington appeared with a visitor who made Elena's heart skip. Vanessa Cole, looking tired but peaceful in a way Elena had never seen before. "Elena," Vanessa said, her voice soft but clear, "I need to tell you something that's going to change everything." Elena gestured for her to continue, sensing that whatever Vanessa was about to reveal would be significant. "During my rehabilitation, I had access to my personal files from 6 years of employment at various companies in the network. I discovered something that even I didn't fully understand at the time: the financial structure behind the cover-up system." Vanessa placed a folder on Elena's desk. "The network isn't just informal cooperation between companies. It's a formal business arrangement with shared legal resources, coordinated financial instruments, and standardized procedures for managing reputation risks." Elena opened the folder to find bank statements, legal retainer agreements, and corporate documents that painted a picture of systematic organization. "They call it the Chicago Professional Standards Consortium," Vanessa continued. 37 companies paying into a shared fund that provides legal defense, public relations management, and financial settlements for harassment cases. The goal isn't to prevent harassment. It's to ensure that when it happens, it can be managed without affecting business operations. Elena felt the room spinning around her. This wasn't just cultural toxicity. It was institutionalized corruption, with clear financial structures and legal frameworks. Vanessa, why are you telling me this? Vanessa's smile was sad but genuine. Because 6 weeks ago, you held me accountable when no one else would. You offered me a chance at redemption when I deserved nothing but consequences. And you showed me that power should be used to protect people, not to silence them. As Vanessa left, Elena sat in her office, reviewing the documents that would undoubtedly trigger the largest corporate accountability investigation in American history. The simple cultural audit that had begun with a glass of Coke had become a catalyst for exposing institutional corruption that affected hundreds of thousands of workers across the country. Her phone rang with Daniel's number. Elena, I just heard from Senator Warren's office. The congressional hearings are being fast-tracked. They want your testimony next week. Elena looked out her office window at the Chicago skyline, thinking about all the other buildings that housed similar networks of corruption, all the other employees who had been silenced, all the other voices that deserved to be heard. Daniel, are you ready for this to get much bigger? His laugh was warm and familiar. Sweetheart, the moment you refused to run from that lobby, I knew we were in for the fight of our lives. The question is, are you ready to become the face of corporate accountability reform? Elena thought about Beverly Washington's transformation from invisible custodian to visible CEO. She thought about Jared Pike's evolution from casual bully to determined whistleblower. She thought about Vanessa Cole's journey from systematic harasser to truth-telling advocate. She thought about all the employees at Arcona who now came to work knowing their dignity would be protected and their voices would be heard. Yes, she said finally, I'm ready. 3 months later, Elena stood before a packed congressional hearing room. Her simple navy dress, a different one, but deliberately chosen to echo the outfit that had been stained with Coke crisp and professional. Behind her sat Beverly Washington, Jared Pike, Vanessa Cole, and dozens of other employees whose stories had helped expose the largest workplace harassment conspiracy in American history. Senator Warren, Elena said, in response to the committee chair's opening question. 6 months ago, I thought I was conducting a simple audit of one company's culture. What I discovered was that harassment and discrimination aren't individual moral failures. They're systematic institutional choices supported by complex financial and legal structures designed to protect perpetrators at the expense of victims. The hearing room was silent as Elena detailed the network of 37 companies, the shared legal resources, the coordinated suppression of complaints, and the financial instruments that had turned victim silencing into a profitable business model. But more importantly, Elena continued, I learned that change is possible when leaders choose courage over convenience, when institutions prioritize character over profit, and when power is used to lift people up rather than tear them down. Behind her, Beverly Washington smiled with quiet pride. In the 6 months since becoming CEO, she had transformed Arcona Dynamics into one of the most sought-after employers in Chicago, with a waiting list of qualified candidates who wanted to work for an organization that actually lived its values. As Elena concluded her testimony, she thought about the ripple effects that had spread from that moment of cruelty in the lobby. Federal legislation was being drafted to require transparency in harassment complaint handling. Business schools were rewriting their ethics curricula around the Arcona model. Companies across the country were conducting their own cultural audits, knowing that accountability was no longer optional. The quiet woman in the stained dress had become a symbol of something much larger than personal resilience. She had become proof that dignity could triumph over cruelty, that truth could overcome corruption, and that one person's courage to stand rather than run could spark a movement that changed everything. In the end, they had learned that the most radical act in corporate America wasn't generating profit or accumulating power. It was treating every person with the dignity they deserved, regardless of their position, their appearance, or their perceived importance. And that lesson would continue echoing through boardrooms and break rooms, corner offices, and custodial closets, wherever people gathered to work and dream of something better than the status quo. The glass of Coke had been thrown in cruelty, but it had landed in revolution. And the revolution was just beginning.